Okay. Let me share my screen here. Give me a second. Share. Let me also make my mug a little bit bigger for your viewing pleasure. Boom, boom, boom. I think that's probably good enough. Let's put it off to the side. Okay. So actually, this is a remake of a video that I made earlier. But upon reviewing, upon preparing my notes for like lessons learned, I realized that I had misstated things, or that I just like had gotten confused about some points. So I've had to reformulate my argument here. So this is if you saw the other video, ignore it, forget it, purge it from your mind. And so this video is the first in this series as far as philosophical videos. The first video was just the introduction. So, okay. So I won't rehash what I said earlier. All right, so we're going to get into it. This particular video is going to explicate Edmund Gettier's famous Is Justified True Belief knowledge essay. But it's just going to deal with case one. He presents two cases in that paper, and this video will just be about case one. All right, so let's get into it. So Gettier is interested in definitions of knowledge of the following form. A, he just labels it A. He also gives two other versions of this, basically the same argument, which he labels B and C. But really, we just care about A. Everything we say about A, we can pretty much just say about B and C. All right, so as he formulates it, S knows that P, right? So a subject knows some proposition. If and only if, and now here come the necessary and sufficient conditions. P is true. S believes that P, and S is justified in believing that P. The justification pertains to the means by which you have acquired this belief. Not any old kind of means will count for justification for the belief. If you flip a coin and can somehow manage to formulate a belief, I don't know how people can do that, but okay, let's say you flip a coin and you're like, okay, it's head, so I believe P, or it's tails, so now I believe not P, or P is not true, right? You don't have justification. That's not a reliable means. We don't consider that a reliable method for acquiring true beliefs. So the justification can only be satisfied by certain methods of acquiring your belief. Okay, now, so his project, his goal is to show that this definition of knowledge, given here by points 1, 2, and 3, do not always constitute sufficient condition for knowledge, which is to say, somebody can meet all those requirements or all those criteria or all those conditions, yet fail to have knowledge. Okay, so and that's what I have him quote. I quote him below, and that's what he's saying, right? He's saying that A is false, right? A fails as a definition of knowledge, in that the conditions stated therein do not constitute a sufficient condition for the truth of the proposition that S knows that P. Okay, now to run his argument, he wants to establish like two features of JTB, or two features of knowledge that he thinks are applicable, and it's going to help him generate his counter argument eventually. Point 1, the sense of justified in the third criterion, in the justification criterion, or the justification requirement. That sense of justified does not guarantee the truth of the proposition. In other words, you can have the requisite justification, yet believe something false, right? So truth is not entailed by the justification requirement, or by having satisfied the justification requirement does not mean that you also have a true belief. Okay. Uncontroversial. Yeah. Point 2. Here's his, let's call it the entailment point. He thinks that if P, the proposition that the subject believes, entails another proposition, call it Q, and S deduces as much, S sees that this is a case of entailment, then S is justified in believing Q. So it's not enough that P entails Q. If P entails Q, then Q is true. But that doesn't give the subject justification for believing it. The justification comes from seeing that this is a case of entailment. Okay, so that's it. Point number 2, let's call it the entailment point. And then we can call the first one the justification point. It doesn't matter. As long as you know, I'll refer to it back as point 1 and point 2. Okay, so I think here, so far, nothing controversial, nothing really that like can be challenged. Yeah, everything he's saying sounds right. He seems to be describing JTB and how knowledge works. Okay, so then now we're going to go to the famous case 1 example. I give it here, and I kind of list it as premises, but okay, you don't need to think about it, think of them as premises, but these are like the conditions, or this is the scenario as he sets it up. So case 1, Smith and Jones are up for a certain job. So let's call it premise 1. Premise 1, Smith is told by the company president that Jones is the man who will get the job. The company president counts as a reliable source of information. I think Gettier says it's strong evidence for, by which he just means it's justification for. So premise 1, Smith is justified to believe that Jones is the man who will get the job. Premise 2, Smith counts the coins in Jones's pocket. He has 10 coins. He counts 10 coins. So this is justification for the belief, for Smith's belief, that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, so we have justification for 2 separate beliefs. And now if we join those 2 separate beliefs and make one new belief, which will be, we're going to join with the conjunction and. So we have a new conjunctive proposition, which we are also justified in believing. We have proposition D, as he calls it. Jones is the man who will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Again, so far, everything's smooth, honky-dory, kosher, legitimate, seems to follow, makes sense, like nothing to object to. Now here comes kind of like the major move here, which is is to establish what he wants to establish. He wants to establish E, and that's why he mentions the entailment point earlier. Premise 4, Smith realizes that D entails the following proposition. The man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, right? This he thinks is entailed or follows from, let's say, D, Jones is the man who will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. So if you believe, or if Smith believes that Jones is the man who will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, then he can also believe, he's justified in believing that the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, so as I say down here, this is what Gettier is initially trying to establish, and I think he's established it. I believe E, as stated here, is true. That Smith is justified in believing the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, and now to kind of set up his counterexample, he's going to ultimately set up a counterexample, the counterexample being a case of someone having satisfied the criteria of JTB, yet who doesn't have knowledge. right? So if he can do that, if he can set up such a counterexample, well, then he's shown that it's not sufficient. JTB is not sufficient for knowledge, right? So here comes the plot twist, as we call it. The plot twist in the story is Smith, not Jones, is the man who will get the job. So this is just a stated fact. He's just stipulating that Smith is ultimately the one who will get the job. Okay, we can't contest that stipulated fact. He's free to make that stipulation. It's not like, it's not inconsistent with anything he said so far, so no problem. 2, Smith, unbeknownst to himself, also has 10 coins in his pocket. Another stipulated fact in this scenario. You cannot question it. You cannot challenge it. And given 1 and 2, Smith says that the proposition E, the man who will get the job has 10 coins, is true. Okay, so at this point, so this is where we're at. He thinks that, so according to Gettier, he thinks that all 3 conditions have been met. He thinks that he set up an example of somebody having a justified true belief, right? So point 1, E, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, is true. And it is true, right? Okay. 2, Smith believes that the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. He does believe that. And 3, Smith is justified in believing that the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. And we already know that he's justified because of the entailment. Okay, again, all of this is according to Gettier. So at this point, Gettier, again, you have to, if you're going by what Gettier says, if you haven't really found any reason to object to it, or you don't say anything wrong with his moves here, he has established that Smith has a justified true belief. And now he's going to say, but it's not knowledge, right? And this is important because this is the counterexample that he needs to establish, a case of somebody having justified true belief yet not having knowledge. So Gettier says, what Gettier says next is very important. The red highlighting is mine, but the original, like italics on no and the bold face, I think is original, right? So quote, Smith does not know that E is true. Smith does not know that E is true. Okay. For E is true in virtue of the number of coins in Smith's pocket. And I put this in red because it's very important here. The reason why Gettier says that the reason why Gettier says that Smith does not know, that he doesn't have knowledge, that P, is because the proposition, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, is true in virtue of the number of coins in Smith's pocket. While Smith does not know how many coins are in Smith's pocket, he didn't count his own pocket, and bases his belief in E on account of the coins in Jones's pocket, because he counted Jones's pocket on his way to arriving at the proposition or at the belief the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. So, all right. So, yeah, and whom he falsely believes to be the man who will get the job. Right. Okay, so that's right. Okay. So the section in red that I've highlighted is what I'm talking about next, right? In other words, Gettier is saying that the truth conditions for E, like the state of affairs or how the world would have to be for E to be true, involves Smith and the coins in Smith's pocket. That's basically what he's saying. And it doesn't involve Jones and the coins in Jones's pocket. Okay. So if you think all of this is right so far, then Gettier has indeed presented an example of Smith having a justified true belief that isn't knowledge, which is to say that JTB isn't sufficient for knowledge, which is exactly what he has set out to prove. Okay, I think no, I think he hasn't established what he thinks he's established. He hasn't given a counterexample of somebody having JTB who yet fails to have knowledge. I don't think he's done that, right? Okay, but that's just my opinion, and I have to argue for it. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to argue for it, and it's a little bit. I don't want to say it's subtle. I don't think it's particularly subtle, but you have to follow. You have to follow the points I'm making, and of course you have to agree with those points because I need them. I need the philosophical apparatus that I'm saying is at play here to show why Gettier has done something illegitimate, and to show why this is not an example of somebody, namely Smith, having a justified true belief that yet fails to be knowledge. Right? I'm saying that Gettier doesn't give the counterexample that he sets out to give. Okay, so just as Gettier gave us point 1 and point 2, like features of JTB, I'm also going to present certain, what I think are truths, philosophical truths, and I think they're pretty intuitive, and we can argue for them. But if you agree with me, then you'll see the force in my argument. If you disagree with me, you have reason to disagree with my argument. But okay, so here we go. So it's going to be a little bit long-winded, and because it's partly in layman's terms. Yeah, so here we go. So my objection, sorry if I repeat myself here a little bit. I'm going to argue that Gettier has not given an example of Smith's having a justified true belief, which is not knowledge. Specifically because Smith never believes E, not E understood as having the truth conditions that Gettier needs to run his argument. Right? So remember, Gettier needs, and remember, I highlighted it, that Gettier says that the truth conditions for E involve Smith and the coins in Smith's pocket. Right? Now I'm saying that's not correct. That's not correct. Okay, so let's talk about the points that I need you to agree with, to agree ultimately with my argument. So one thing to keep in mind, there's a difference between the sentences or utterances we use in expressing propositions, beliefs, or thoughts. There's a difference between the sentences or utterances that we use and then the propositions themselves, which we take to be the meanings of the sentences or the meanings of the beliefs or the meanings of the thoughts, right? So there's sentences and then there's corresponding propositions, let's say, but they're not the same thing, right? And maybe they're not even the same kind of thing, right? Maybe they're not both linguistic, but it doesn't matter. Just as long as you know that sentences are like utterances or written down words, and then there's the meaning. What do those words mean? And that's a different thing. Okay, so let's make this point. So that's the first point. And then the second point related to that is that different sentences can express the very same proposition. And also the identical sentences, like two sentences that are stated verbatim, right, word for word, exactly the same, can express different propositions. And then I'll give an example, and very intuitive example. So this is not, I don't think this is controversial at all. Okay, so for example, let's say that your name is Tommy. Let's also say that your mom has a nickname for you. It's Bubby. If your mom says Tommy has 10 coins in his pocket, and the context clearly suggests that you're the relevant Tommy, right? It's what she intends to say something about you, and the context suggests that it's about you, then she has expressed the proposition that you have 10 coins in your pocket, right? And I can express this as saying the proposition is that you have 10 coins in his pocket. I don't need to use her words, right? I'm not quoting her. It's not a direct quotation, right? So that's it. You understand that, right? Okay. Now, if she had said Bubby has 10 coins in his pocket, and the context clearly suggests that you're the relevant Bubby, then she has expressed the proposition that you have 10 coins in your pocket. It's the exact same proposition. In one sentence, she says Tommy. In another sentence, she says Bubby. And we can even imagine that she says them in the exact same context, right? Okay. So two different sentences can express the very same proposition. Uncontroversial. Uncontroversial. Now let's go the other way, where the very same sentence, right, okay, can express different propositions. When I say, I'm going to marry Miyako, it will express a different proposition than when you say, I'm going to marry Miyako, right? If for just the very fact that when I say I'm referring to myself. When you say I, you're referring to yourself. So the propositions are going to be different. Okay, and it could be a different Miyako, but it could be the same Miyako. That doesn't matter. But just the fact of the indexical I, sorry for the technical term, it's just for I. When you say it, it means one thing. When I say it, it means a different thing. So, but we can utter the same words. I'm going to marry Miyako, but it will have a different meaning, right? So two sentences of the same, two instances of the same sentence, right? My I'm going to marry Miyako, that's one instance, and your I'm going to marry Miyako, that's another instance of the same sentence, can express different propositions. Uncontroversial, easy to understand. We're all on board, right? Okay. The second important thing to point out, and this is the most important thing to realize and to agree with, if you're going to agree with my argument ultimately. I'm not saying that's the reason to agree with it, but okay. The second important thing to keep in mind is that there are no propositions floating around in the ether or in Plato's third realm. And what I mean is that propositions only exist. Remember, propositions are the meanings of sentences or utterances or beliefs or thoughts, right? Propositions only exist and are only determined in context from someone having expressed them in a sentence or in a belief or in a thought, right? In other words, it makes no sense to talk about the meaning of a sentence, belief, or thought that no one has uttered or said or believed or thought. Because, yeah, it makes no sense to talk about the propositions of sentences that nobody has ever spoken or believed, because there's no context. And only context provides, only propositions only exist within context, right? So thus it makes no sense to ask for the truth conditions of a proposition that no one has uttered, believed, or thought. That's it takes a little bit of a while to like wrap your head around what I'm saying, and also to convince yourself that, yeah, that makes sense. That's completely right. Right? Like the meaning of the proposition is determined from context. So it only exists in context. It has proposition sentences that are not said in context have no meaning. Like you can't determine the meaning, right? So, all right, because there is no meaning. There is no meaning because the meaning only comes in context. Okay. It might take you a little while to like agree with that, but just like mull it over and think about it. And then as I argue, maybe it'll start to make more sense. So it's not just that we cannot figure out which truth conditions are applicable. If you state if you make a sentence, that's a declarative sentence that can be true or false. If you declare something, like we can ask, like, what does he mean? And to figure out what he means, we can figure out the relevant truth conditions, right? What are the relevant truth conditions for that declarative sentence? What would make that declarative sentence true? And if we know what would make that declarative sentence true, then we know the meaning, right? Because the meaning will be given basically in the truth conditions that we say are relevant to that utterance or that sentence, right? So it's not just that we cannot figure out which truth conditions are applicable. It's that sentences or beliefs not uttered or believed by anyone do not exist. Sorry, do not exist. It's that sentences or beliefs not uttered or believed by anyone don't exist. Like, so there are no relevant truth conditions to speak of, right? The point is that it is only in the context that propositions and the relevant truth conditions exist. That's my point. That's my point. And I think it's like, okay, it might be controversial, but it's not wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's correct, right? So now maybe I can do a better job of arguing for that point, but anyway, I'm going to move on. I think this is completely correct. Obviously, I think that, but okay. So returning to Gettier, Remember that the reason why we don't want to attribute knowledge to Smith is because there seems to be a disconnect between his justification for his belief and the relevant truth conditions for the belief, right? Which he said included Smith and the coins in Smith's pocket. All right, so let me remind you of Gettier's explanation. I'm going to quote it again with the red. Smith does not know that E is true, for E is true in virtue of the number of coins in Smith's pocket. While Smith does not know how many coins are in Smith's pocket, and bases his belief on E on account of the coins in Jones' pocket, whom he falsely believes to be the man who will get the job. So my question is this: if Gettier is right that the truth conditions for Smith's belief, it's the only relevant belief in question. There's nobody else's belief. There's not Gettier's belief. There's not your belief, and there's not some platonic belief floating in the air somewhere, right? It's only the only belief that's in question here is Smith's belief, and he says Smith's belief is made true by the coins in Smith's pocket, right? So my question is, how could Smith's belief possibly have the truth conditions that Gettier says it has? Again, those truth conditions, he says, are Smith's being the man who will get the job and Smith's having 10 coins in his pocket, right? But who has that belief? Who expressed that belief with those truth conditions, right? It wasn't Smith, because recall that his belief is that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, right? It doesn't matter how we phrase his belief. It doesn't matter which words we use to express his belief. His belief is that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, Gettier uses the very convenient phrase, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, but he's only using that to kind of like fool you into believing that the truth conditions can involve Smith. But they can't, because when Smith believes the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, we can express that proposition as Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, right? Because the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, even though it's phrased one way, can have the same proposition as Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. And those are the same propositions. Okay, just different sentences with the same proposition. So again, it doesn't matter which words we use to express, let me put a double S here, express the proposition. When Smith deduces from D the proposition E, how could Smith be a part of that proposition? How could Smith play a role in the truth conditions for that belief, right? And again, recall the belief that he's using to deduce E from. The belief is D. Jones is the man who will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. And from this proposition, D, he deduces E. The man who will get the job has 10. So how could that not be Jones has 10 coins in his pocket? He believes Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. That's the corresponding proposition to the sentence, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, right? And that's just a sentence, right? That's just a sentence. We're just using this sentence E to express the proposition. If he can just point to Jones and say, this guy has 10 coins in his pocket, it would be the same proposition, right? It would be the same proposition as the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. That guy pointing to Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, right? Like, they're all the same proposition. But Jones is the one that makes those propositions true. He's the one that's part of the truth conditions, not Smith, not Smith. Okay, so what are the truth conditions for Smith's belief? Clearly, they are: one, Jones is being the man who will get the job, and two, Jones is having 10 coins in his pocket. In other words, Smith believes that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, as I already said. And if that's what Smith believes, then there is no disconnect between his justification and the object involved in the truth conditions for the belief, because that object is Jones, because his belief is that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, right? Now, for Gettier to create this disconnect, he must invoke a different E, well, I'm calling Platonic belief E, in which has as its truth conditions Smith's being the man who will get the job and Smith's having 10 coins in his pocket. But nobody believes this. Nobody has this belief. That's not Smith's belief, right? For it is because of this disconnect, right? The disconnect between the justification and the object that's part of the truth condition, let's say. For it is because of this disconnect that he denies that Smith has knowledge. But my point is that Smith never believes that the Platonic E that Gettier simply invents, right? Gettier is simply introducing this Platonic E, this belief, this proposition, the man who will get the job has 10 coins, in which it refers to Smith, right? And so in which Smith is part of the truth conditions. But nobody has that belief. Smith doesn't have that belief, right? Smith believes Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. And when he believes, and when he says, or when he thinks the man who will get the job has 10 coins, he means Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. So the proposition Jones has 10 coins in his pocket is true, because Jones, in fact, has 10 coins in his pocket. Smith believes that Jones has 10 coins because he counted them, right? And because Smith is justified in believing because he counted them, right? So he believes it. It's a true. So proposition Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, which is the proposition, right? Yeah, we know the sentence is the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, but that just means Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. So the proposition is Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Only if you get stuck on thinking the proposition is the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, and you don't realize that that has to mean Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, then you might start to think, well, the expression the man has 10 coins in his pocket refers to somebody, and so the relevant somebody must be the person who fits the definite description, and that person is Smith. So Smith is the man who will get. No, that's wrong. That's wrong, right? That's wrong. First of all, nobody uttered that sentence. Who uttered that sentence? Who uttered that sentence with Smith as the, right? Nobody. He's just using that sentence again. He's just pulling it out of thin air and he's applying it here, but it cannot be Smith's belief. So Smith, so the proposition Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, which I'm saying is the exact same as the man who will get the job has 10 coins when Smith says it or when Smith believes it, is true. Smith believes it, and he's justified in believing it because he counted the coins in Jones's pocket. Thus, Smith has knowledge. He has justified true belief and knowledge because they're the same thing. Like, you can just argue that they're the same thing, or you can at least argue that this is not a case of somebody having justified true belief and yet failing to have knowledge. No, he has knowledge. He has knowledge that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. That's not very like, why do I need entailment? Like, okay, you don't, but like, that's all he believes. He believes that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay. And so, but there's no disconnect now. There's no disconnect between his justification, which was counting the coins in Jones's pocket, and the object involved in the truth conditions, which is Jones, and the coins in Jones's pocket. He has that. The connection is there. So he has knowledge. No problem. All right. So that's my argument basically. So no one, so kind of like to reiterate or to beat a dead horse, no one says, expresses, utters, believes, or thinks anything with the proposition that has Smith as part of its truth conditions. Gettier has simply snuck in this proposition to create the disconnect he needs to run his argument, in order to say that Smith has satisfied the JTB criteria yet doesn't have knowledge. But Smith does have knowledge. He knows that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, you can only deny that Smith has knowledge if you think he believes that Smith, not Jones, is part of the truth conditions of Smith's belief. But Smith plays no role in the truth conditions of Smith's belief. We already know that it's Jones, right? Gettier needs us to agree that Smith's belief has Smith as part of its truth conditions. And the way he has snuck in those particular and incorrect truth conditions is by talking about what makes this Platonic proposition E true. But again, no such proposition exists. No one has uttered it. It hasn't been uttered by Smith, right? So, and certainly Smith never believes it. So there's no disconnect between Smith's justification and the object involved in the truth condition, and the object involved in the relevant truth conditions, which is Jones, right? Thus, Smith never has a justified true belief that isn't knowledge. Gettier has failed to show that JTB is insufficient for knowledge because he has not come up with a relevant counterexample, a counterexample in which somebody has JTB but fails to have knowledge. No, in this example, Smith has knowledge. He's satisfied JTB and he has knowledge. And you can only say that he doesn't have knowledge if you say that his the proposition, the relevant proposition, the one that's part of his belief, is that if you say that what he actually believes is that Smith has 10 coins in his pocket, right? And people don't want to say that because they're like, no, he doesn't believe that. He believes that the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, and that man is Smith. Yeah, but again, if you're doing that, then you're falling victim to this. You're falling victim to the fact that you're actually entertaining this proposition, this Platonic proposition E, as a proposition in the first place, when nobody has uttered that proposition. And nobody has. In what context did somebody say the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket and was referring to Smith? In what context? Who said that? In what context? In no context. And it's never said, it's never uttered, definitely not by Smith, when you realize that his belief is entailed by Jones is the man who will get the job and Jones has 10 coins. How could Smith possibly be part of the truth conditions of a proposition entailed by D? It can't, right? So that's it. Gettier is kind of like pulled the wool over people's eyes by introducing this other proposition E, and because it's very natural to assign the referent to that phrase, the man who will get the job, by assigning the actual referent, right? Like, oh, but nobody's ever uttered this sentence. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And so there's no proposition to speak of, right? Okay, that's it. That's my argument. I hope you can follow that. I hope it makes sense. And I hope I haven't said anything like blatantly wrong, as I think I did in my first video when I tried to explain this. But yeah. All right, leave your comments. And I will try to respond. That's it. I'm gonna sign off here. And yeah, I'll make a follow-up video, which will be a lessons learned video about this exact argument. And I feel like as you do philosophy, as you tackle philosophical problems and you come up with solutions, presuming everything you're saying is working, or let's just say everything like you're saying is correct generally, and little by little you start to gain like certain truths and certain insights, right? And little by little, like you're like, oh wait, I disagreed with this position by Gettier, case one, and these are the reasons why I disagree with it. And in giving those reasons, I was able to articulate certain beliefs or certain truths or certain ideas that I think are correct. And these start to shape your philosophical worldview, right? And then little by little you start to accumulate, and then you have like a certain perspective on things, and then these are the truths that you rely on in future arguments, right? These are the truths that you can fall back on and say, wait, this is not true. This goes against what I said earlier when I criticized Gettier, right? And so yeah, so the lessons learned is kind of like a synthesizing process or a summary process or just like a reflective process about what exactly like we were able to establish, what exactly we were able to learn or gain from understanding Gettier. And by the way, even though I'm attacking Gettier here, like I am not belittling Gettier. I think he's wrong, but his argument is very elegant, very brief, very powerful, right? And I mean, you just go look up all of the answers or the responses to Gettier and see the impact he's had in epistemology. Basically, I'm saying a bunch of people are wrong. Okay, I could be wrong, but yeah, this is my position. Like, this is my argument. If you think I'm wrong, I would love to know. I would love to hear why, and where, and how. Right? Or you can just say, "Hey, dummy, you're wrong." Okay, that's fair. Yeah. So it's just a comment section. I don't expect you to put forth your argument, and I really don't want to read a whole argument. Like, but if some of you are interested in exchanging ideas, like I can maybe share my email, and then you can post stuff. I say that with a little bit of like not qualms, but like apprehension, because I'm not trying to invite tens and hundreds of responses that like I'm gonna feel like obligated to respond to. For one, it's really, really tedious to read that many responses. Two, people are really, really bad at philosophy, right? And three, people are really, really, really bad at philosophy, but it doesn't stop them from like believing they're like the more ignorant you are, or the worse you are at philosophy, it tends to go like inversely proportional to your confidence. Not for everybody, but like a lot of people who are just not good at philosophy, like think that they're good at philosophy, and like and because I'm going to go on a little soapbox here, and because to be good at philosophy means you have to be good at judging arguments. If you're not good at judging arguments, then of course you're going to believe some crappy argument is better than some like better argument, because you don't have the skills to judge arguments accurately, right? Okay, so imagine getting in a discussion with somebody like that. And like for me, like I have like some, let's say my argument is really good. Let's say I have a strong argument. Let's just suppose it's strong. And you have a weak argument. We can go back and forth all day long, and I can explain things to you like until I'm blue in the face, and use coloring books and use crayons to make it as simple as possible, but you still don't have the skills to see why you're wrong. Like, that is unproductive for me. First of all, I'm learning zilch, right? Two, it's a huge time investment. And three, ultimately nothing has changed. Not even you have improved, right? So the incentive to do exchanges with emails with people who aren't good at philosophy isn't very high, let's say. But I am willing to discuss philosophical matters with others, and like you don't have to be like at my level or higher. Like it could just be like you have a genuine curiosity, or you have genuine questions, or you have genuine puzzlement, or you have genuine objections, but you're open to being shown that you're wrong. As I am, I'm open to being shown that I'm wrong, right? Like, okay, so that's my attitude about that. But yeah, so if somebody in the comment section says, "Hey, you know what? I'd like to, you know, continue this conversation, or I have some questions," or like, yeah, I'll share my email. Why not? All right, peace out. I got to do a couple of steps before I can actually log out, but I'm saying peace out now. Peace.